All right, ready to dive deep. Today, it's all about antibiotics.
Sounds good.
Specifically, a class called Cephalosporins. Think of them like a family tree of bacteria fighters.
Ah, I like that.
And, well, you've been sending in questions.
Yeah.
So we know you're ready to tackle first and second generation cephalosporins. Understanding these is like having a superpower, seriously.
Absolutely.
You'll know how to fight infections like a pro.
Like a pro, yeah. And that's where I come in, trying to break it all down.
Perfect. So first things first, what even are cephalosporins? Where did they come from?
So get this, they actually come from a fungus.
No way.
Yeah, it's called Acremonium.
Acremonium.
But it used to be called Cephalosporium.
Huh. Interesting.
Nature's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like penicillin, we're getting powerful medicines from the most unexpected places.
That's wild. A fungus fighting bacteria.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do these cephalosporins actually work? What makes them so effective?
Their secret weapon is this thing called a beta-lactam ring.
Beta-lactam ring. Okay.
Think of it like a tiny little wrench, and it messes up how bacteria build their cell walls.
Ah, so it's like sabotaging their construction project.
Yeah, exactly. Like, imagine you're building a fortress and someone comes along and disrupts the whole thing.
Makes them vulnerable.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that analogy. Now, why are there different generations of these drugs?
Well, it's like an ongoing arms race.
Ah, yeah, makes sense.
Bacteria are always evolving, always finding ways to resist our attacks.
They're sneaky.
So scientists got to keep improving the drugs, creating new generations with better abilities to fight back.
So it's like a constant back and forth.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. All right, well, like any good family saga, let's start with the first generation, the pioneers.
Yeah, the OGs. These are the tried and true members. Cefazolin, cephalexin, cepherdine.
Okay, I've heard of those.
They're really good against gram-positive bacteria.
Right, the ones that cause what, like skin infections and strep throat?
Exactly, those everyday infections.
So they're like the frontline soldiers ready for anything?
Exactly. And one of your sources even mentioned cefazolin being used for surgical prophylaxis.
Oh, right, to prevent infections after surgery?
Yeah. It's like giving your immune system a boost before going into battle.
Makes sense. But you mentioned bacterial resistance.
Oh, yeah?
What happens when those bacteria start fighting back?
So some bacteria have this tricky defense mechanism. They produce enzymes called beta-lactamases.
Beta-lactamases. Yeah.
Picture them like tiny Pac-Man.
Pac-Man, huh?
They gobble up that beta-lactam ring.
No.
And then, boom, the antibiotic's useless.
So the bacteria are developing their own weapons.
They are. It's incredible and frustrating.
Wow. So that's where the second generation comes in, right? To help us out.
Exactly. They bring in new tactics.
Ooh, tactic.
Like cefuroxime, cefoxin, cefaclor, each one with its own strengths.
I see.
And they're better at tackling some of those gram-negative bacteria that the first generation had trouble with.
Okay, so like respiratory infections, things like that.
Yep. And even some gynecological infections.
Mm-hmm. So they've expanded their battlefield.
Exactly. And, for example, cefoxitin.
Cefoxitin, okay.
It's often used for gynecological infections because it can handle anaerobic bacteria.
Oh, right, the ones that don't need oxygen to survive.
Exactly. Those tricky ones.
That's pretty impressive. So they've really stepped up their game.
Definitely. But here's the thing. Not all second-generation drugs are equally effective against those anaerobes.
Oh, really? So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution?
Nope. It really depends on the specific infection and where it is in the body.
So doctors have to be really careful about which one they choose.
Absolutely. It's all about choosing the right weapon for the right battle,
That makes this all seem so much more complex than I thought.
Oh, it is. And that's why we have tools to help us make those decisions.
Which brings me to that spectrum table I sent you. It seemed a bit overwhelming at first.
Oh, yeah, the spectrum table.
But is this what doctors actually use to figure all this out?
It is. It might look like something straight out of a textbook, but it's super important. Think of it like a map of the battlefield.
A map, okay.
It shows you which bacteria each generation is most effective against.
And it includes their activity against those anaerobes we talked about.
Yep. And their resistance to those beta-lactamase enzymes, the Pac-Man.
So it's like a cheat sheet for battling bacteria.
Exactly. It helps doctors make the best choices for their patients.
This is all fascinating, but it also makes me wonder about the bigger picture,
Right, it's not just about the individual bacteria.
Exactly. Like, what are the consequences of using these powerful tools?
That's a great point. It's not just about winning individual battles, it's about winning the war.
The war against bacteria.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of antibiotic stewardship comes in.
Okay, I'm ready to hear more about that. It sounds important.
It is. It really is. It's about the long game,
The long game, okay.
making sure these antibiotics stay effective for years to come.
I see. So it's not just about treating the infection in front of us, it's about making sure these drugs work for everyone in the future.
That's exactly right. It's about being mindful and responsible. You see, we got to understand the consequences of using them too much.
Or using them the wrong way.
Exactly.
Right.
Overuse and misuse can lead to, well, antibiotic resistance.
And that's a big problem.
It is. It affects everyone.
Makes sense. If we keep hitting bacteria with the same weapons, they'll figure out how to dodge them.
Exactly. Like that arms race we were talking about.
Oh.
We make new antibiotics, bacteria become resistant, and it just keeps going.
A vicious cycle.
We need to break that cycle.
So what can we actually do? What's responsible antibiotic stewardship look like?
It starts with you and your doctor.
Okay.
Always follow their instructions when it comes to antibiotics.
I guess that makes sense.
They'll figure out if you really need them, which type is best, and the right dose.
So no sharing antibiotics with friends or family, even if they have the same symptoms?
Nope, definitely not. And don't pressure your doctor for antibiotics if they say you don't need them.
Right.
Sometimes our bodies can handle things on their own. Our immune system is pretty amazing.
It is. And using antibiotics when you don't need to just gives the bacteria more chances to become resistant.
Oh, I see. So it's about being patient and letting our bodies do their thing when they can.
Exactly. And it's not just individual actions. There are bigger efforts, too.
Like what?
Well, hospitals have guidelines for prescribing antibiotics and tracking those resistance patterns.
So it's like a team effort.
Yeah. Doctors making smart choices, patients using antibiotics responsibly, and everyone working together.
To stay ahead of those superbugs.
Exactly. And it all comes back to understanding these medications, their strengths, their weaknesses, and,
The long-term consequences.
right, thinking about the bigger picture.
It's pretty humbling. We started with a simple fungus, and now we're talking about global strategies.
It is. It shows how everything's connected.
And speaking of connections, we've been focused on fighting bacteria, but what about our own WN bodies?
That's a great point. We're introducing this powerful force into, this super complex ecosystem. Right, our bodies. So what are the unintended consequences there?
Now, that's a topic for another deep dive.
Oh, I'm intrigued already. But before we go there, let's wrap up these first and second generation cephalosporins.
I think we've given our listener a good foundation.
We've talked about where they come from, how they work, what they're good at, and what they struggle with.
And how the story's still going. Bacteria evolve, we adapt. It's a constant process.
It really is. And we've highlighted why this antibiotic stewardship thing is so important for everyone.
Absolutely. It's about protecting these medications so they can keep protecting us.
It makes you appreciate just how complex the human body is.
Yeah, and how important it is to stay informed about the medications we use.
I've learned so much today, and I hope our listener has too.
Me too. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to our health,
Absolutely. And remember, this is just the beginning.
The tip of the iceberg.
There are even more cephalosporins out there, the later generations.
Yeah, each one building on the last, getting more specialized.
Wow, so the story continues. I can't wait to see what happens next with these amazing drugs.
It's a fascinating field, always changing.
Well, for now, I think we've given everyone a good grasp on first and second generation cephalosporins.
We've covered a lot of ground, that's for sure.
From a fungus to a whole battle plan. Pretty remarkable.
It is. It really is.
Huge thanks to our expert for guiding us through this deep dive.
Always happy to talk about antibiotics. They're so important.
And to our listener, thanks for being here. Remember, stay curious, keep learning, and ask your doctor questions. Until next time, stay healthy and keep exploring.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? About that balance in our bodies.
It does. It really emphasizes how important it is to, ask questions.
Right. And stay informed about the medications we're using.
For sure. For sure.
Well, I know I've learned a ton today.
Me too.
And I hope our listeners feel, like they can take this information and run with it.
Yeah. Knowledge is power, right? Especially when it comes to your health.
So true. And hey, we've only scratched the surface here. Oh yeah, there's so much more.
We've talked about first and second generation cephalosporins, but there are later generations out there, even more specialized.
Right. Those later generations are even more fine-tuned to fight specific bacteria.
It's like the story keeps going.
It does. Bacteria are always evolving, so the research never stops.
That's incredible. I can't wait to see what the future holds for these drugs.
It's an exciting field. And, well, who knows? Maybe we'll do a deep dive on those later generations someday.
I'm in. But for today, I think we've given everyone a great understanding of first and second gen cephalosporins.
Yeah, a solid foundation.
We talked about where they come from, their strengths, their weaknesses, and of course, why using them responsibly is so important.
It's quite a journey, right? From a fungus to a whole battle plan.
It really is. And on that note, a huge thank you to our expert for taking us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. Always happy to nerd out about antibiotics.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to ask your doctor questions. Until next time, stay healthy and keep exploring.
You've been listening to the Learning Podcast, a production of metaNESTA. Remember, learning is a journey. One step, one insight, one skill at a time. We'll see you next time. Keep learning, stay curious, and as always, be awesome.